Hello, the following is a presentation on Situational Awareness Reference Architecture, or SARA, developed and maintained by the Industrial Control System Information Sharing and Analysis Center and its membership. SARA is a reference architecture for shared visibility, founded on situational awareness and visibility at the facility level, industrial facilities like water and power and transportation, and through extension and knowledge sharing at broader communities including municipalities, industry segments, states, regions, nations, and the international community. SARA captures technology and process manners of establishing and maintaining visibility based on open standards of practices, industry standards, and industry expertise. SARA is compatible and extensible, combining existing industry efforts in the U.S. and elsewhere, as well as providing a framework for solution providers, including integrators and vendors, to develop products and solutions for asset owners. Situational awareness in the SARA context is achieved through four means: establishing awareness at facility and community levels of who the organization is. For example, that we are a municipal water organization, nonprofit, owned by a municipality. Our decision-making process is through the City Council. To inventory what devices we actually have, activity, what those devices are actually doing, and then based on our awareness, how do we use information shared with us, how do we share information with others. For identity, SARA includes standards of practice for determining an organization's identities, looking at issues such as what capabilities we have as an organization, what is our decision-making process, what is our organizational structure. There's an existing open architecture that's published in the public realm that SARA includes. SARA will also look to capture other assessment procedures that can be portable and can be used by asset owners and their partners to establish and maintain self-awareness. Inventory is the process of identifying what devices consist of what devices are included in the composition of the industrial facility itself. From the control system perspective, we're talking about things like routers and switches and HMIs and SCADA devices, as well for the process equipment, what devices are being controlled by the control system network. How are these put together? What is the topology? How are these individual devices configured? What does our physical infrastructure look like? At a municipal and community level, the same sort of inventory might be the inventory of facilities themselves. Do we know what we have, what infrastructure we have as a community? Activity is a matter of what these devices are doing. What is going on in our facility. When we look at a control system network, for example, if we have the inventory, we know that we have some number of PLCs, for example, with given IP addresses and MAC addresses, and they talk through certain connected switches with SCADA servers or HMIs over certain TCP ports with certain patterns. Can we establish that visibility? Can we maintain that visibility over time? If, for example, as is common with attacks that we see on industrial facilities, new traffic is generated, that someone has plugged something in, somebody has compromised some system, and started to do new and exciting things with our existing infrastructure, can we detect that? And then sharing, of course, is a bidirectional process. If someone shares knowledge with me, that there is, for example, perhaps a vulnerability or an attack against certain type of equipment, how do I use that? If I have inventory and activity maps already, perhaps I can identify that I do or do not have that equipment, or that is or is not of a certain revision level of the software or firmware involved, and I can use this in a process fashion that matches my operational process. And from an outbound perspective, how do I derive actionable, shareable knowledge that I may want to share with others? How do I address issues, particularly like anonymization, to make sure I'm not leaking information? And what sort of communication schemas do I use? How do I technically get information into and out of my facility in the first place? And the reason the ICS-ISAC and everyone else in the industry has been pursuing information sharing is to get to the emergent properties of sharing all this knowledge. These properties we're familiar with in research and in business and so forth. The values of the internet are not the network itself, it's the value of the emergent properties of sharing information. Similarly, for critical infrastructure, when we get to the point when an artifact of knowledge can be created by a researcher, perhaps something observed by an asset owner, perhaps it's something that a manufacturer or a public sector entity or a private sector entity has discovered and feels like sharing. Can they be shared in real time with centers like the ICS-ISAC through a network of knowledge centers who themselves are connected with asset owners? So that, for example, if the piece of knowledge being shared is that a new and active threat has been discovered, that an asset owner, in this example connected through a managed security service provider, can receive that knowledge, that through the SARA framework and best practices, that the asset owner could have already made decisions on what to do with knowledge of this type. Perhaps in this case, this asset owner has just chosen to apply in real time a monitoring rule based on this type of knowledge, so that from this moment forward they will be aware of this threat if it occurs to them. Perhaps they will also perform an automated report looking at the forensics and the historicals their system contains to see if this threat has shown itself on their environment before. And perhaps if, for example, this threat had been seen by this asset owner 6 months ago initially, and 6 weeks ago it was seen multiple places, and 6 days ago it started to trend upwards, perhaps aside from using that information and that data for their own purposes, they could also derive knowledge. And perhaps, again, it is just that we are perhaps a water facility in the southeast U.S., and we saw this 6 months ago. It spread 6 weeks ago. It's trended upwards in the last 6 days. Share at least that much knowledge with the outside world, so that knowledge can then be shared with others, so that the rest of us in the external space can perhaps derive knowledge such as this piece of threat information was produced only today. We're beginning to see that it was seen in water first 6 months ago, that 3 days ago it was also seen in electric utilities, that yesterday it started to be seen in transportation, and we can derive knowledge from that. At the technical level, SARA looks to capture industry standards and best practices in a way that can be applied by asset owners, in a way that vendors can design their products for, that integrators can combine products into solutions for asset owners, so that the basic issues of inventory, activity, and the delta, the change in those, can be built into systems that asset owners use. That where these asset owners find that they are able to share knowledge, that they have standard ways to do that, using existing schemas and transports like STIX and TAXI, IODEF, the collective intelligence frameworks, and other means. That we have a method for dealing with privacy issues, legalities, and motivations that are captured from the experience of the private sector and the public sector in the real world, and put into a format that real people doing the real work can use in their daily jobs. So the timeline for SARA, in the last 2 quarters of 2013, the functional draft document of the SARA guideline will be established with the ICS-ISAC and its members, working together with industry partners, and we'll be performing a limited pilot where asset owners will communicate in real time with knowledge centers, including the ICS-ISAC and EnergySec and others, with a further goal that in calendar year 2014, a formal 1.0 version of the guideline SARA documentation will be published, and the pilot will scale out to include more asset owners and more organizations in more industry segments, and across a broader integrator and vendor and public sector framework. So for more information, you can find our website at ics-isac.org. You can email for this particular project to sarah@ics-isac.org, and you can find us other contact information on the website as well. So thank you very much for your time. Good day.